In this video, I will be talking about the four basic pillars of paint production. We can also, set it to be. We can also say it is actually the building block for all types of paint. That means you are going to definitely find it in all paints, irrespective of what paint you are actually producing. You are going to find the element of this four basic chemicals or four basic groupings of chemicals in every type of paint. So I want to explain in detail what they are, and so that you can have an ample knowledge of them and you'll be able to effectively use them in your production. Don't assume that you know it. That one of the danger of assumption is the fact that it blocks you from, or it prevents you from having to get deeper knowledge about a thing, because of your the barrier of assumption that I know it. No, you probably might have one or two things to learn from this video. So just stay with me as I explain the four basic pillars of paint or paint production, or chemicals for paint production. The four basic pillars for chemicals for paint production. So just stay with me. What I will actually be doing with this video is to explain in details what it is, their definition, their example, and the function in any given paint. That is like exactly what we're actually going to be doing with this video. So the very first one I actually list here is the solvent. I've actually put them down for easy explanation. So I give the first one here is the solvent, because it actually happens to be the very first thing that goes into your mixing pot, your solvent. What is solvent? Solvent is actually any chemical. Let me use it that way. Solvent is any chemical that is used in degrading, that is used in mixing or in tinning, or in that serves as a vehicle. Solvent is the chemicals that serve as a vehicle for every other chemicals to ride in. You definitely will agree with me on that definition. I don't want to use jargon here. I just want to keep it simple and basic so that we can actually understand and enjoy ourselves in this video. So solvent is actually the vehicle in which every other chemical component travels. Let me break that down. Solvent is actually the vehicle that moves every other chemical to their finish point or to their destination, which is the application stage. So all the chemicals that you're actually having will be dispersed in solvent. In other words, the solvent will be what will actually carry them. It will be what will actually accommodate them. It will be what will actually allow them to mix together, and it will also help in breaking down some of these agglomerates that you're actually bringing together, which are immiscible chemicals. So the example of solvent, one of the examples of solvent, especially for water-based paint, is water. Water is actually a vehicle that convey every other chemicals so that they can actually mix together. So water is an example of solvent. It's been a while I use this marker, so it's giving me an issue. So water is an example of solvent. And one thing about water is, one of the definition of water, especially as it relates to it being a solvent, is that it is actually a universal solvent. What does that mean? It can dissolve virtually anything. Water can dissolve virtually anything. You can use it in any paint, any type of paint, including gloss paint. You said, that's not true. Well, it's something that we've done before. It's something I have formulation on. So, and I've actually practicalized it, and I actually practicalize it how you can use water to dissolve. It's just basic chemistry and all that. So water is a solvent. So other solvents include which is actually for maybe oil-based paint, which are for oil-based paint. We have kerosene, we have petrol, we have white spirit, we have xylene, we have toluene, we have loads of them. We have loads of them. What we are actually going to use in citing them is the fact that they have the ability to dissolve your chemicals. They have the ability to ensure that your chemical is dispersed. That is actually solvent. I'm just trying to keep it very non-technical. Let me just put it like that, because it's more or less like I'm getting a feedback that I'm a little bit, I sound a little bit high. In other words, sometimes I use technical jargon, and people say, oh, "God, slow down a bit." So that's why I'm trying to find a balance, in in having to like just tamper justice with mercy on using technical terms. So we have kerosene and others, which are for solvent-based paints, including gloss paint, floor paint, epoxy, and all that. So we have kerosene, we have petrol, we have white spirit, we have xylene, we have toluene. But those are not, these are not just the ones that we have. We have so many. So, but then these are practically the one that is used the most, especially in solvent-based paints. Now let's get back. We have some other solvents that are called co-solvents. We have some other solvents that are called co-solvent. Co-solvents are solvents that are secondary. Co-solvent are solvent that serves as secondary solvent, that serves as secondary dissolver. If I'm actually going to use non-technical terms, that serve as secondary dissolvers. So we have example. What are the example of co-solvents? What are the example of co-solvent? We have hexanol. Hexanol is one example of co-solvent. What it does in paint is that it allows the molecule of it temporarily solving your binder. It softens your binder for it to be able to, for the molecule of that binder to be able to fully connect or link together. We call it cross-linking, so that they can, fully cross-link for it to form a very let me use the Earth's term now, a healthy film. Let me just use it that way. For you to have a complete film formation, so we need a cool solvent like hexanol. What are the other example of cool solvent? We have butyl glycol. Butyl glycol. In fact, all the glycols are cool solvent. Your ethylene glycol, uh, your propylene glycol. These are cool solvents. They perform the function of having to keep the paint in its molten stage. In its molten state, rather, let me just use it that way. They perform the function of having to keep that paint in its molten state. In other words, they allow it to stay fluid. They allow it to stay fluid, which is actually one of the characteristics of any solvent. So, but then when the paint is actually applied, they now start escaping or leaving the surface and allow the paint to do its primary assignment, which is one for beautification or decoration, and two for protection. So those are some of the example of cool solvent that we have. Which other one? White spirit also fall under this cool solvent. White spirit, ethanol. They still fall under this, serving as cold solvent. In other words, one of these, one of either of these will be the main solvent, and then other ones like this can be the cold solvent. In other words, they now help the major or the main solvent to help its functionality and to perform their own function and duty in that paint as well. So sometimes when we understand all of these things, we will not be brushing them aside when we are actually producing. So many people don't use stuff like this because they think it is not important. But in my previous video, I explained the importance of some of these co-solvents in paint. Example, I started an example for this, the propylene glycol, how it can help you eliminate roller marks. So all of these things are actually very, very good to be used in your paint, especially when you are producing top-notch high quality paints. You want to employ the likes of propylene glycol, you want to employ the likes of texanol, you want to employ the like of butyl glycol and ethylene glycol. Even though you are not using much or every one of them, you just want to add interplay, or you just want to juxtapose some of them in your production to ensure that you have quality production. So I guess we understand that. I'm trying not to elongate this video beyond no beyond what is reasonable. Maybe keep it short as much as 20 minutes or thereabouts, so that we can actually get through all of these things. So we'll move on to the second one, binder. Binder happens to be one of the major pillar of paint production. Binder, what it does in paint is to hold all of your both your solvents, every chemicals together after it has actually been dispersed in the vehicle called solvent. You understand what I said about solvent? Solvent is actually the vehicle that every other chemical is actually driven in, and then we now come to binder. Now binder has the function of holding everything together, especially in their dispersed state. What do I mean by dispersed? No, the agglomeration, or no, the agglomeration of your agglomerates. That means your particles. I'm, I'm starting to sound technical again now. The breaking down of your solid particles. That is what we call the agglomeration. So the breaking down of this particle. So when you are actually dispersing, you are adding a force, a shear force, in that medium, and separating the colloids, the particles of whatever chemicals you are actually adding. You are separating them. You are putting a force to pull them apart so that they can actually spread themselves or themselves in this solvent. So we call it dispersion. So we are dispersing them in the solvent. So what you now had to hold them together and keep them in their dispersed state is called binder. It's called binder. Now we have primary binder. We have two types of binder. We have primary binder and we have secondary binder. We have secondary binder. What's our primary binder? Your primary binder are basically your acrylic, your PVA, your acrylic, and every other binder that you can think of. Your ACR, all of those things are just your binder. Those are the things that will actually help in holding your chemicals in their dispersed state. So we call them the primary binders. We call them the primary binder. Then we'll now move on to the secondary binder. What is secondary binder? Secondary binder, if I would not want to waste our time, I'll just go straight to example. Secondary binder, the example of your secondary binder is your thickener. This is the layman term. We call thickener rheologifier. We call them rheologifier. We call them rheologifier because this primary binder has the function of holding all the pigment together temporarily in the medium. They have the function that, because that is not the holding of pigment particle serve as their, do I put it as secondary function in the dispersed state. But the primary function is for it to hold that all that has actually been dispersed, especially the pigments, on the substrate, to bind them to the substrate. That is the primary function. But in their secondary function, they can keep the binder separated in the medium, but they can't hold them. They can't really hold, how do I put it now, the weight. So we now need a secondary binder, which is thickener, to ensure that the medium, or let's say paint now, so that we can understand what we are talking about, so that the paints remain in such a state, a viscosity state, that will not that will not allow the pigments or whatever chemicals has actually been dispersed in your solvent to settle down. um all of the chemicals that is used in paint production, just like I said, and I will always repeat myself, there are chemicals that are incorporable. They are not cooperating with one another. Permit that English. So they are not cooperating. They are immiscible chemicals. I think that's the proper way to, that's the proper way to describe them. They are immiscible, different immiscible chemicals held together by a binder, which is primary binder and the secondary binder. So because of their mass, they have the tendency of actually settling, or they have the tendency of regrouping, or coming together and forming a mass again, an agglomerate, and then go and settle. So what will not allow that to happen is your secondary binder, which is your thickener. It ensures that the medium is in such a state, well thickened state, that will not allow the particle to easily come together. That is the reason why, if your paint starts settling after you produce, your secondary binder is failing. Your thickener is not enough. That's what it means. Your thickener is not enough to carry the weight, or to hold together all of your agglomerates, especially the pigments that you use, which includes your filler and every other thing. So if your paint is not thickened enough, the paint will settle in no time. And then you now begin to see water on top, and then your filler will settle down, or your pigment will settle down. So that is the function of this primary binder and the secondary binder. So your the example of your secondary binder includes HEC, which one of the popular brands is Nitrosol, Milosol, and every other sol that Milosol, and every other thing that HMP, HMPC, and every other one that CMC. So those are your secondary binder. Let's now go to pigments. What are pigments? Pigments are the chemicals that give coloration, to your paint, that gives coverage to your paint. They serve three major purposes. One, give coloration. Two, give body. Three, they now give coverage. So in other words, in just pigments, in just the pillar called pigments, we have about three different chemicals that are actually hidden within that is called pigment. The very first one we know is your prime pigment. I've explained what prime pigment is over and over again. Your prime pigment, example of prime pigment includes your titan. Example of prime pigment. So inside this just pigment, we have prime pigment, titan. Example of prime pigment, titan. So titan happens to be the very primary pigment that gives coverage. It serves the purpose of giving coverage. So under this pigment also, we have what is called the filler. And this will give you body. And under this, we have the color pigments. It gives coloration. So all of this are still very much under filler. So we have the prime pigment, the prime pigment, which example is titan. We have mica. Is it mica or mica that you call it? We have mica. We have zinc oxide. But the most popular of them all is your titan, which is for coverage. So what does it mean that titan serve as coverage? There's a dot here. If I'm to paint over this black dot, I will need something that can actually cover it. So what titan does in your paint is for coverage is to mask this black dot and give it the coloration that I want it to give. It will hide it. It will hide it. So it is what will determine the hiding power of your paint. It will determine the hiding power of your paint to an extent. Yeah, because we have some other things that can actually determine the hiding power, which include your filler, which include your color pigment. So that is just that about that. So under filler, we now have we have your the example calcium CaCO3. We have kaolin. They are fillers. So they serve the purpose of giving the paint its body. In other words, its weight, and also they contribute to coverage. They contribute to coverage. For example, in a paint where these fillers, that you understand that the word filler means they are actually practically filling a gap. The word filler means they are filling a gap. So in a situation where you have a paint that does not have calcium, kaolin, and some other fillers that you might actually know, maybe pyrite and every other pigment, maybe bentonite and bentone and all those pigment that you may know. If that this filler is not actually there, you have to increase your titan for you to have coverage. But in a case where you have these fillers, you use minimal amount of your titan. That is why I said it helps coverage. It helps in coverage also. So your filler helps in coverage. It also gives body to the paint. So those are their multidimensional function in the paint. So we now move on to the color pigment. These are the things that gives your color, that the paint its color, your oxides and your paste. One of these days, I will actually have to talk about color pigment because it's a very wide, how do I put it now, subject. A whole lot is to be talked about there. So just for this video sake, we just actually have to leave it at that. This video is going to have a continuum, or is going to be continuum, because I still have to explain some certain things. Then we'll move on to the fourth pillar of paint production, which is the additives, or which are the additives. Additives are chemicals that are actually used in paint production in their very minute, in a very minute amount. Let me put it that way. They are chemicals that are required in paint production in their very minute amount, in a very trace amount. Example of additives. We have dispersants. We have dispersants. We have surfactants. We have preservatives. And we have The co-solvent also falls under addictive co-solvents. Also, no, there's a whole lot about addictives. In fact, it's a subject on its own. Until sleep, and so many other. In other words, just to give you an understanding of what it is just the trace amount or the trace chemical in your paint that has a specific function, that had property, a predetermined property to your paint. For example, when propylene glycol is added, which can serve as a co-solvent and as a trace amount addictive, it's solved the problem of roller mark. If the addictive ethylene glycol is added, it serves the purpose of anti-tow, antifreeze, anti-tow and antifreeze. In other words, especially in cold climates, they usually add it a whole lot in their paint product because they have very cold weather, unlike what we have here. That we are actually very, very blessed. So those are the four pillars of paint production. In my subsequent video, probably I will now have to be bringing all of these chemicals so that we can begin to identify them together, so that I will not just be speaking in abstract for us to be able to no, I know some of us know some of these chemicals and we are actually very familiar with them, but it won't still stop me from having to bring it to the screen, or to our screen, or to our view, for us to be able to identify them together. Now, we are going to stop it here and see you in my next video. Bye.